Good afternoon and welcome to the 2025 NCAA Convention. We're thrilled that you joined us for this featured session entitled Elevating Equity, Expanding and Celebrating New Opportunities for Women's Sports. My name is Felicia Martin. I get the privilege of serving as the Senior Vice President of Inclusion, Education, and Community Engagement. My pronouns are she and her. I'll serve today as your facilitator, moderator, and host for today's session. A few housekeeping items. Additional information is available on the NCAA Convention mobile app. There you'll find full convention schedule, session information, convention news updates, video highlights, and other resources that might be helpful for you are also available at ncaa.org/convention. We want you to use the convention app. You'll be able to find the presentation from today, presenter information, and some of the resources that we're going to reference throughout the session. Also, we want you to join the conversation using #NCAA. We encourage you to use #NCAA for all content related to your convention experience. The session today. During this session, Elevating Equity, Expanding and Celebrating New Opportunities for Women's Sports, you'll receive a brief summary of NCAA Emerging Sports for Women and some exciting updates about the ESPN-NCAA Championships broadcast deal. By joining us today, you'll gain some insight on how to focus on accessibility and enhance visibility, and how that is core, it's influential factors that are driving women's sports growth. Today's session also features some pretty amazing administrators, former student athletes who will share how they amplified women's sports programs, have successfully added women's programs, and what strategies you may want to consider as you go back to campus or your conference. The NCAA's business plan emphasizes growing the college sport ecosystem by inspiring the next generation of student athletes and by cultivating up-and-coming sports, particularly opportunities for women. Our evergreen goal is to support emerging sports and programming, sustainable growth towards full championship status. The last couple of years have been pivotal with the exploding popularity of women's sports. To be sure, women's sports have always been impactful, engaging, and competitive. The most recent tipping points have been punctuated by record-setting women's sport events. Attendance numbers are shattered over and over again. It isn't just the avid sports fan. The energy and excitement of women's sports is converting casual viewing fans. Television ratings are skyrocketing and reaching new heights. More people are tuning in to watch women's sport events than ever before. There are huge increases in viewership numbers of existing NCAA championships. Huge. For example, 2024 Division I Women's Basketball Final Four averaged 13.8 million viewers. 2024 March Madness averaged 2.2 million viewers. That's up 121% from 2023. You've got Division I Gymnastics National Semi-Meets. They were the most watched semifinals since 2017, up 11% year over year. D1 Softball. 2024, the Women College World Series up 2% across the 15 games. In addition to the increased viewership, new women's championship sport participation opportunities are on the horizon. The Emerging Sport Program for Women provides an avenue for new participation opportunities for women. The NCAA conducted the first analysis of athletic participation in the early 1990s. 20 years after Title IX, 70% of athletic opportunities were on men's teams. Thus, the Gender Equity Task Force was formed to address the gap. The Emerging Sports for Women program was created to fast-track new women's sports to championship status. Displayed on the screen and available in detail in the convention app is a list of current sports in the NCAA Emerging Sport program. There are also information sheets about each of the current emerging sports available in the back of the room. Women's wrestling achieved the required number of 40 teams for the Committee on Women Athletics to recommend it to move forward to championship status. Division I, II, and Division III are voting this week. If approved, the first NCAA championship would be winter 2026. Pause for applause. Much progress by other sports are on the list as well. Notably, triathlon is right at 40 teams with acrobatics and tumbling, and stunt near 40. Women's flag football is applied to join the emerging sport program and is being reviewed by the Committee on Women Athletics. One of the most exciting recent development for women's college sports is the new NCAA ESPN broadcast deal that began in fall 2024. 8-year agreement, valued at nearly $1 billion, 3 times the previous deal, rights to 21 women's and 19 men's events, including expanding D2 and D3 coverage. At this time, I'd like to bring up my colleague, Julie Kimmons, Director of NCAA Championship and Alliances Broadcast Services, to the stage. Julie was, in the words of Hamilton, in the room where it happened, and is here to share more details about this historic contract. Please, a round of applause as Julie takes the podium.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Excited to share some of the details of this new historic deal that was signed back in January of 2024 and went into effect this fall. So more than 2,300 hours of championship coverage will be on ESPN's linear and digital platforms annually. As Felicia mentioned, it's 40 championship events. We've got 800 hours on linear, which is just an astronomical number for ESPN to do. They've been a terrific partner to us over the years, and they've been showing their commitment to showcasing women's sports as evidenced by the over 31,000 hours of women's sports coverage they distributed on ESPN Plus in 2024 alone. The historic numbers that we've seen, the shattering of records and viewership continues, and we only see this going up from here. The viewership of college sports in 2024 was up 9% year over year across ESPN Plus. So that's regular season and championships. And we're really excited that we added 9 new championships to our portfolio. As mentioned, this includes Division II and Division III championships, which we were really excited to add those to the slate of championships that are broadcast on ESPN. So we added Division II and Division III women's volleyball, as well as Division II and Division III men's and women's basketball. We added Division I men's and women's team tennis. They also broadcast our individual tennis championship this year, and we're hopeful that continues moving forward. And we also brought in the National Collegiate Men's Gymnastics Championship to the slate of championships. We're also really proud of pushing them to distribute all rounds of several championships. Years ago, it was not uncommon to see that they only would do the semifinals and championship. We now have every single game of the following championships that are on ESPN platforms: all rounds of women's basketball, women's volleyball, women's gymnastics, softball, baseball, FCS football, men's and women's soccer, men's and women's lacrosse. I should note those are Division I and National Collegiate. And for the second year and moving forward, we'll have the exclusive rights for the WBIT as well as the NIT. International rights are also included for those 40 championships, and that is also for the Division I men's basketball championship. ESPN does a fantastic job of producing these events, and they spend more than $30 million annually in production across our championships. We did add the opportunity to distribute more of our early round coverage on their platforms by enlisting the help of our hosts, who are producing many of our preliminary rounds across all 3 divisions in an opportunity to increase our distribution. We're working closely with them to maximize exposure opportunities on ABC and ESPN. We certainly know the value of free-to-air being on ABC, and we have guaranteed ABC coverage for Division I Women's Volleyball Championship match, the D1 Women's Basketball Championship game, and also our National Collegiate Women's Gymnastics Championship. We're looking at additional ABC opportunities for both D1 softball and D1 baseball. We've seen all of those sports perform extremely well when they've been on ABC. We're also upping the number of selection shows that ESPN is distributing. So for this year, we'll have 11 selection shows, 6 of which are women's championships and 5 of which are men's. We added a new selection show this year and moving forward for women's gymnastics, and we'll have a standalone show for D1 women's lacrosse. Additionally, we, as part of the agreement, added in new preview shows and segments for 7 of our NCAA championship events: women's volleyball, women's gymnastics, softball, baseball, men's ice hockey, women's basketball, and FCS. All will have dedicated programming to preview and fill time between semifinals at those events. They also committed to doing 8 hours of creative content. So certainly they have shown us, you've seen over the years, their exceptional storytelling program, where they are now committed to doing 1-hour magazine type shows for 8 of our championships. It started this fall with D1 women's volleyball. Hopefully you had a chance to see that. If not, you can go back to ESPN Plus and watch it. But we'll also see them feature women's gymnastics, men's ice hockey, women's basketball, wrestling, men's lacrosse, softball, and baseball. So great shows, great opportunities for them to continue to tell the stories of our student athletes. That series is called Game On: Journey to the NCAA Championships. And we also push them to develop elevated marketing campaigns for more of our championships. In the past, we just had 4 of these elevated marketing campaigns. We're now up to 7 moving forward for the next 8 years. I think I've exhausted all the things that we added to the agreement, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. One of the best parts of a presentation like this is the opportunity for the audience to hear from your fellow colleagues, administrators, practitioners who are doing the work, who are showing up in ways to not only model ways, but give you some ideas about what you can take back to campus. So here's what we're gonna do right now. We're gonna pause and let our panelists introduce themselves, and then we're gonna have some dialogue. We're hopeful that we'll have some time at the end for any questions that you might have, and then we'll go from there. So let's get started.
Thank you, Felicia. Hello, my name is Lisa Peterson, and I am currently the Vice President for Olympic Competition at the Big 12 Conference. I spent 27 years on campus across the entire country and have had the opportunity to work on several NCAA committees.
Hi, I'm Chris Colvin, Commissioner of Conference Carolinas. We will sponsor 26 sports next year and offer opportunities for 30 to our members. I'm in my 6th year at Conference Carolinas at Division II Conference. I've actually worked at all 3 divisions. I spent 19 years at Division I at Furman University, was Associate AD there for a little while, spent 4 years as an athletic director at Division III at Nichols College. So excited to be here today on this panel.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephanie Stevens, and I am the head women's basketball coach at Gallaudet University, which is located in Washington, D.C., and I'm also the senior woman administrator, and I've been the head coach now for 12 years and new SWA, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Jayla Wright. I'm grateful to be one of the Women of the Year honorees this evening. Yeah. I am a former student athlete, softball pitcher from Duke University, and currently I'm a graduate assistant for the softball team at the University of Tennessee.
Nice. Did y'all hear that humble brag? She'll be on the stage tonight, so there you go. Lisa, let's get started with you.
Great.
You served on several NCAA sport committees, including Division I women's basketball and women's volleyball committees. How have you seen the increase in the media coverage impact the popularity and growth of women's sports? And then talk a little bit about what the Big 12 is actually doing to capitalize on that visibility.
Certainly. Well, first, I want to thank all of the people who started watching things that we've been watching for years. You know, the sports haven't changed. We just finally got people to pay attention to them. And one of the things that you went through, Felicia, is just the numbers and, you know, where it has grown. And I spent 4 years on the volleyball committee, 4 years on the women's basketball committee, and every year the numbers continue to rise. And so I love seeing it's always record setting. I mean, you know, the 18.9 million that was averaged for the women's Final Four last year is just, I mean, that number, just to put in comparison, NFL rates higher than that, but there aren't many things that rate higher than that. So it's really great that we get the fans to come in and see what we've all been paying attention to and doing, because once they start to see it, they get excited about it. And one of the things that I think that I've always said with women's sports is people feel connected to women, and I think it's because the women are able to tell their stories. They show who they are as people, not just who they are as a student athlete. And so I think that that's one of the things that finally got, and then the social media, and I'm not even going to begin to tell you how much I don't know about social media, but I have seen what it has done for, you know, what we are all working on. And so, you know, getting the personalities that you are able to see in women's college basketball, but then also all of the other sports that have been going on, that's what attracts people to start watching. And then as we know, once they start watching, they want to keep watching, because what you as student athletes do is pretty incredible. And so it's been like almost, you know, mind-blowing just to be able to see what has happened and how it hasn't dropped off. I know you know, people were concerned with some personalities that have left different sports. Is it going to continue? And all we've seen now is it just changes the game. Volleyball, the record number that watch volleyball. And I was actually just on a call with our head coaches and got the stat that it was 6 hours of semifinals. So 6 hours of people watching volleyball, and it averaged 1.2 million. It's averaged over 6 hours. Like, that's just incredible. And so what I love is all that we do as, you know, administrators, as commissioners, as, you know, coaches, all the things that we're pouring into that, people are finally starting to see that. And I realize that there is a lot of change in college athletics right now, but I think that we need to lean into what women's sports brings, because the brands now want to become a part of it because they start to see these numbers. And so the advertisers want to come in and put money into that. And as we know, like, that's the direction that we're heading, is what is revenue producing. And I think that in a time where it feels like other sports are taking over, we need to remember how important women's sports are. And not just for the revenue generation, but as a former student athlete, everything that I've ever done is because I was a student athlete, the opportunities that I've been given, the rooms that I've been able to be in, and, you know, those experiences. And the C-suite, you always hear that all the women that are in C-suites, the percentage of them that used to be former college student athletes, that's very important. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to where those sports aren't going away. And just the importance of all that. As my shirt, everyone watches women's sports. And what we're doing with the Big 12 is just really amplifying those stories, trying to find not just who people are as student athletes, but who they are as people. And, you know, it's amazing what you get to learn about people when you take them out of the uniform and who they become. And so just continuing to do all of that. Let's capitalize on what's happening with the Olympics. We saw the record numbers, you know, excited to have it in the United States in 2028, and just don't let that fall by the wayside over the next 4 years. Continue that excitement, continue telling those stories, because there's a lot of great stories to tell. And I just am so grateful that people are starting to see what all the student athletes have been doing for so many years.
That's good. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Joe, let's go to you, because from a student athlete's perspective, there's thought, right, that the media coverage has changed the landscape for women's sports. And talk to us a little bit. Lisa mentioned brand. What are you seeing as far as visibility and fan engagement and brand partnerships? Talk about anything that you think has been positive or negative from a student athlete perspective.
Media coverage has significantly boosted visibility, fan engagement, and brand partnerships with greater recognition and financial potential. We have fans, other athletes, men and female, and celebrities all around the world who are tuning into women's sports finally. I remember my time at the World Series last year. I remember watching an interview Caitlin Clark did, and she had stated how she was watching the Women's College World Series instead of Game 1 of the 2024 NBA Finals. How cool is that?
Yeah.
So I think the world is finally taking notice, and women student athletes have to push higher because we finally have the notoriety. However, on the flip side, there comes demands, there comes challenges that overall take a toll on your mental health and your overall well-being. The phrase comparison is a thief of joy comes to mind. With so much publicity on social media, rankings are coming out, brand deals, partnerships. You can all see that and see what another athlete is doing, and that causes you to compare yourself. I myself faced that personal struggle while I was at Duke, and I just had to constantly remind myself, like, hey, my journey is completely my own, and I'm on my own path. So I think a call to action definitely needs to be done. Women student athletes need to make sure that we are receiving the right media training, and coaches need to make sure to put student athletes through counseling. Coaches can simply have their student athletes sit on a panel as such and practice interview questions and discuss certain topics. Coaches can also put their students in counseling as well, so they can truly have a safe space to dissect their thoughts. But overall, I think there's great promise, and that promise outweighs the pressures.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you. Coach Stevens, what about it? What about being a head women's basketball coach and an administrator? And how are you able to work balance? How do you ensure equitable opportunities? What tips would you like to share when it comes to wearing the multiple hats, and how we all should be still advocating in ways to grow women's sports?
Sure, I think number one, balance is so subjective, especially in this profession. We work such long hours, unusual hours sometimes, and we have to understand and acknowledge and recognize that we are sometimes thinking about work-related information when we are at home, and vice versa. So constantly understanding that there is change every day. You know, when you go into the office, nothing is the same. There's a student athlete that needs assistance. There is something going on. And I think for us, you know, as coaches and administrators and people who want to get in this industry have got to understand and recognize, like, change is fine, change is good, and it's okay. Like Charlie Baker said yesterday, change is good. And, you know, we also have to understand when change is arising, such as now with these emerging sports, these wonderful opportunities for our women's sports and women's programs, we've got to keep pushing. And it's a good reminder for myself, who is a former student athlete, that, you know, everybody else before us has worked to this point as well, and we should never be complacent. So when, you know, you're asking about equity, we have to think about that all of the time. That should be on our mind all the time. It's a priority. And we do not know everything, and we need to understand that as well. So when we do not understand, or when we are unsure of something, we need to be somebody who's able to remove our ego and ask the right questions and seek for guidance. And the tips, gosh, multiple hats, you know, you've got to, one thing that I would say is trust. The acronym is transparency. And that doesn't just mean the communication aspect, but it means the comprehension in the communication. So, you know, if an admin or a coach to a player, a student athlete, if we are saying something but they do not understand it, well, we're not effectively communicating, and we need to make sure that that comprehension is there. And reliability, we need to know that people, especially with our multiple hats, they are going to expect a lot from us, and that's okay. And challenge that and embrace it and be okay with needing to be relied on and depended on, because we need to make sure that we fulfill that in our duties. But we also need to know when is the right time we need to step back or maybe seek that assistance, where if something's going on in, you know, for women's basketball, my program, but I have something related to SWA, well, I'm in season. What does that mean? Well, you've got to prioritize, and you've got to make sure and allow assistant coaches to take over and then, do your effective duty as an SWA, for example. And then the support system is humongous, and that's not just externally, that's not just who is in your circle of mentors, of mentees, that's internally as well. So having that support on campus, within your communities, and then outside, and conventions like these. And this is so important to build connections. And, it's so small, but it's very, very important. And then, the last thing is tempo awareness. I didn't want to say time management because, again, time is subjective. We have unusual hours, and sometimes we are working when everybody's sleeping. So the tempo awareness for ourselves internally is very, very important, and we must continue to recognize when we have energy rhythms that need to be focused on a duty and know when to prioritize that and when to put that kind of on the back burner or hold it or give it to somebody else.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner, we asked you to be on this panel for a reason, and I'm going to read the question because we need to make sure that everybody understands the work you're putting in right now. Your conference sponsors beach volleyball and bowling, both formerly emerging sports, along with acrobatics and tumbling and women's wrestling, two current emerging sports. Additionally, women's flag football will be sponsored starting in 25-26. Which has applied to join the NCAA Emerging Sport program. Emerging sports you are. Based on your experience, what strategies can conferences implement to support their membership to enhance and elevate women's sports opportunities through the emerging sports programs?
All right, thank you, Felicia. I think first I want to just start with kind of an overall philosophy. It's my belief that the role of a conference office is to come alongside our institutions and help those institutions achieve their missions. And intercollegiate athletics plays can play a role on different campuses in different ways. I've seen it across all three divisions, how that can vary, but I believe it's our role to come alongside and help our institutions do that. I think the emerging sports that you just mentioned, all of those play a very pivotal role in institutions using those sports to fulfill their missions. So why does Conference Carolinas provide opportunities, or as of next year, we'll provide opportunities in 30 sports to our members? And the answer is simple, is because we have institutions that have chosen to invest in these sports for a variety of reasons, and so we want to come alongside and provide that opportunity. So to the specific question that was asked, how can conferences support their membership? I think it's important for conferences to be proactive. I think being proactive is a very important concept there. I mean, of the 30 sports, 4 of those are in partnerships with other conferences. So conferences can come together. By ourselves, we don't have enough. 6 is usually the number we're looking for. But if we partner with another conference, maybe we have that opportunity. I think conferences can consider beginning a level of sponsorship, even if you're not at that fully sponsored level. We have a category in our bylaws that will allow us to begin a small level of sponsorship if we have at least 4 institutions. And we even do that for developmental sports, not at the sub-varsity level. So I think regular conversations with athletic directors and board members, we have it as a regular agenda item on our spring meeting agenda every year. And I just think finally, once the conference sponsors it, it's really important to work hard to create a great conference experience. But I thought what I would do as I wrap up this question, we've gotten a lot of publicity and questions and comments about women's flag football. And so I thought I would just take a minute and kind of walk through how that happened, what that process has looked like for us. Conference Carolinas was the first Division I or II conference to announce sponsorship of that last summer. There now are a total of 4 conferences throughout Divisions 2 and 3 that have announced plans to do that. Some are already doing so. We'll begin next year. But a couple of years ago, women's flag football came on my radar. I just saw that the NAIA was doing it and thought it was interesting and interesting to look into. So as I mentioned before, we have a regular standing item on our agendas with our board about sports sponsorship, those that we have, those that are close to the 6 number, and those we need to talk about for the future. And so I just asked the question about, are y'all interested in us gathering information on women's flag football? And the answer was yes, but we didn't really know where that was going to go. And then, we reached out to the NFL, and they've partnered with a company called RCX. So we reached out to the NCAA and RCX, and it became pretty apparent that the investment was pretty significant from them. We brought the NFL and RCX into an AD meeting, gathered information there, continued to have multiple meetings with athletic directors, both collectively and individually. I had the chance to go to Indianapolis to attend a strategy meeting during the NFL Combine about the growth of women's flag football, and I learned a ton of information there. And so by last spring, we were in the place where we had one institution that was already announced they were doing it. Then we had 2 more that had said, yeah, we'll do it if the conference does. So we were at our meeting in the spring, and we kind of had 3, but then we had 6 to 8 others that had expressed some level of interest. And so ultimately, I ended up posing the question to the group, to those that were potentially interested, and said, all right, assume the conference had 5, would you be number 6? Because 6 was the magic number. And ultimately, we had 3 schools that said, well, yeah, if you already had 5, we would make number 6. So then we got to 6. And so we made that announcement in the summer, and then since then we've added 2 more. We have a total of 8 institutions that will begin competing next year. So we're excited about that opportunity.
Good, thank you. I don't know if you can tell, this panel is all about the humble brags. I don't know if y'all are picking up on them, but they're all over the place here, so it's making it good to hear. So Jay, let's come back to you. Talk to us about how student athletes, particularly in women's sports, because that's what we're talking about, can effectively share their stories to elevate their voices, and what role can coaches and administrators and advisors, sports information staff even, play in helping to support student athletes?
Women student athletes can effectively share their story simply by leveraging their personalities through their own desired social media platforms. I had a teammate, Kelly Torres. She created her own podcast where she would share her softball journey and bring on other softball players as well to compare and contrast what their universities allowed them to experience. I had another teammate, Amaya Burgess. She created a club called Duke Blue Crew where she would post on social media when and where to come support a Duke women's sporting event. Come show your support, bring your banners, let's cheer them on together. I love TikTok. I'm praying that it doesn't get banned soon, but we don't know for sure. But I've shared my own personal experiences through that. I recently just posted a drop ball video. That was the pitch I was known for in college. So I'm teaching other softball players how to throw it ultimately, and even the little babies as well. But it's just truly all about what you're comfortable with and what desired social media platform you want to use. I think women's sports information staff can help their student athletes by liking, reposting, sharing their content on the sports page, so the student athlete can gain their own notoriety through the university, other audiences, and other fans.
That's good, thank you. Coach, let's go back to emerging sports. Gallaudet University sponsors 2 emerging sports, stunt and triathlon, and as well as women's flag football, which is applied to join, as I said before, the emerging sport program. How have these sports influenced your student athletes, the athletic department, and the campus more broadly?
Undoubtedly, the excitement, number one. It's not only for the student athletes, but us as coaches and administrators and the university. It's almost, kind of empowering different ways for our student athletes to shine. And the current student athletes that we have, especially for D3, they play multiple sports. And the beautiful part about it is, us coaches, we need to encourage our student athletes at the D3 level to play these multiple sports. So, there are 7 student athletes of mine who, when they're done and when we are hopefully in March, done with our season, they want to play flag football. And there are just so many different opportunities for our female student athletes, and it is exciting, and we need to continue embracing that. And I think, once we develop these new skills I don't know enough yet about stunt, but I'm going to learn because again, that change is constant. So we've got to make sure that we are engaged and stay engaged in new sports and new opportunities for our student athletes, because that's, at the end of the day, who we service.
That's good. Lisa, what about Big 12? I know you got several schools that support emerging sports, equestrian, triathlon, acrobatics, and tumbling. While the Big 12 Conference also sponsors an equestrian championship. What benefits have your schools and the conferences experienced from sponsoring these sports?
Well, the diversification of the student athlete population is probably the biggest, and then that can also lead into increase in attendance at the institution. But I think it just gives a different opportunity for that student athletes didn't have at the collegiate level. And we also added a beach volleyball championship, and we've added a women's lacrosse championship, and this will be the first year for both of them. And I worked at an institution, where acrobatics and tumbling, was where it first was added, and just to see the different opportunities that you get, because again, I truly believe in the student athlete model. I believe in being able to provide the education opportunities, but also those athletic opportunities. And so anytime that we get the chance to do that in sports that are growing, and it's just a matter of getting them in front of the right people to see, but the skills, and it just broadens the number of student athletes. I know you said at Gallaudet they play more than one. At most institutions, that's another set of student athletes that didn't have those opportunities before. And so it just continues to increase that. And again, the diversification of the types of talent and athleticism that you get to see in the different sports has been incredible.
That's good, thank you. Chris, you gave some strategies earlier, a couple tips. But I want to go back to that because we want to hear about any strategies you think conferences should implement to ensure sustainability, because that is a conversation, particularly in our current landscape, that we can't not talk about. But talk about any strategies that conferences might employ for sustainability of women's sport opportunities.
Okay, thanks. And I'll be brief because I think several of the things I mentioned earlier likely are relevant here as well. But I think it's important to continue to be at the forefront of conversations, meeting agendas. I think it's important to ensure that the sports that you do sponsor have equitable access to conference championship enhancements as other sports. I think it's important also to note, there's a reason why there's been so much success in emerging sports at Division II and III institutions, and why many of them are so Division II and III heavy. You mentioned acrobatics and tumbling and others. And the reason is because I mentioned before about institutions choosing to invest in athletics in order to fulfill their mission. At many Division II and III institutions that are enrollment-driven institutions, providing that opportunity for additional student athletes is a core mission and a core part of what they're trying to do. So I think that's important to note. I think conferences can be proactive, like I mentioned earlier, partnering with other conferences, just coming up with creative ways to help those institutions that are interested in sponsoring a sport make it the best possible experience that they possibly can. But the other thing that I'll note, and I want to kind of nuance the question a little bit, the world is changing. As we heard yesterday, college athletics is changing. College athletics needs to evolve. I believe that the sport offerings on our campuses 20 years from now are going to look a whole lot different than they especially did 20 years ago, and a little bit more different than they do now. And so, I think the question of, ensuring long-term sustainability of women's sports opportunities may not always be the exact same question of maintaining sustainability of a particular sport, because I just think there's a lot of evolving out there. But as long as we're being proactive, looking for those new opportunities, finding what do young women want to compete in at the high school level, at the college level, and trying to find ways to provide competitive opportunities for them to do that.
That's good. Thank you for sharing. All right. You're transitioning. You already transitioned. You're in the process. Student athlete to graduate assistant. And you're a graduate assistant on a softball team too, right? So talk to us a little bit how important it is as far as representation is concerned. When you think about leadership roles within sport programs and your thoughts around inspiring the next generation of women leaders.
Well, it definitely made me tear up a little bit. I wish I had one more year to play. Being a Blue Devil was definitely the best experience, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. But ultimately, I'm just so grateful that I had women who truly adored me beyond being a player, and they also looked like me. Head coach Marissa Young, she's actually here today. Coach Olivia Watkins, both coaches on the softball team, AD Nina King, Director Leslie Barnes are all women on Duke's staff who truly propelled me to reach my potential and beyond that. Having that kind of support means everything and truly lets you know that they're not going to let me fail, so why would I let myself fail? But I'll read you guys a statistic. As of 2024, there are 59% white female coaches, 3% black female coaches, and 5% female other coaches in softball. This uneven distribution just highlights how hard it is to be a woman of color in the professional softball world, and this ultimately trickles down to a student athlete as well. I'll give you another statistic. There are 73% white female student athletes, 6% black female student athletes, and 22% other female student athletes in NCAA softball as of 2024 as well. So even though the number is small for us black female student athletes, I'm grateful to know that it is growing. It was only about 3% while I was in college, but I just would love that for you guys to hear and for the NCAA as a whole to hear that it's imperative that we put women of color in these professional roles, and this ultimately trickles down to the student athletes as well as it diverses the playing field. So in my graduate assistant position, I hope to provide the same love and support that my mentors at Duke gave me. My future coaching philosophy when I do become a head coach is to be unapologetically who you are, to be confident, to work hard, study the game, and ultimately represent your culture in a positive way.
That's good. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to do this last question for all of the panel, and then we're going to go to the audience to see what questions you might have for our panelists. So, Lisa, get us started here.
Okay.
What other trends do you foresee shaping the future of women's sports that you'd like the audience to consider?
Well, the trends are, I think that we need to embrace what we have and make sure that we do everything that we can to continue to increase and not fall by the wayside with all of the change that is currently happening in college athletics. So let's ride this wave, however long it might be. Ride the wave, don't give up on it. Continue to push for the women's athletes and the opportunities that they're going to, the women's student athletes and the opportunities that they're going to be able to have at your institution, at your conference, you know, whatever that might look like. And social media is a great way to do things for your student athletes that doesn't cost a lot of money. You know, just as Jayla said, retweet what they're doing, because then that's going to continue to help them. It could bring bigger brands into your institution or into your conference, and you know, just continue to continue to make it a priority. Like, think of, with everything that's happening, do everything that we can to protect women's sports.
That's good. Chris, before you answer the same question, I want to remind the audience you can use the QR code to submit your questions, and then they'll come through. And so I just wanted to remind you of that if you have additional questions. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thanks. You know, I think there's a lot of uncertainty with what's going to happen with the settlement at the Division I level, what that will mean for the roster size cap for those institutions at the Division I level that opt in. And so I think there could be a lot of opportunity for the Division I schools that don't opt in, for the Division II schools, for the Division III institutions, that there may be student athletes that are not able, that because of roster size caps, maybe aren't able to compete at that level. And so if schools, again, are proactive, trying to find niche opportunities for student athletes, I think there could be some real opportunities there at the Division II level, for example. And the other kind of just thing I would just say generally, I think for a lot of small institutions, small enrollment institutions that are enrollment driven, you know, they have to find things to separate themselves, things to make them unique, things to make them attractive to prospective student athletes. And that's not all going to be in athletics. Some of it's going to be in the art department, the drama department, the music department. But the athletic piece, as long as we are looking for those opportunities and finding ways to provide what students are looking for in their college experience, will be important.
Thank you. Coach, same question. What trends?
Sure. So I think we need to consistently be ready and listen to our student athletes and our prospects and everybody who's younger. And we have social media, and we have, these TV rights, and we just need to listen. And we also, on the university side, we need to make sure that we are aware and understand campus context and where your university is at that moment, because there will be challenges everywhere. And there are challenges, but don't be complacent with those specific challenges, because that could be, that burst of opportunity for our female student athletes. And I think it's very important to just make sure we are not complacent. We are constantly welcoming different ideas, and those trends, let them keep coming, because it's very exciting and just different opportunities for those female student athletes to shine in different ways.
Thank you. Taylor?
Academics still needs to be a strong point of emphasis. I would not be on this panel talking to you guys today if I didn't invest in the whole aspect of my student athlete career with academics being at the forefront. With NIL being so heavily influenced as it is today, we need to not let the student athlete forget that we are more than our sport. We are exceptional at it, but we are still going to be the next future doctors, leaders, teachers, mentors. We need to remind them that we still need to have knowledge to reach the cream of the crop. So what are we going to do to support women's sports? We need to make sure we need to invest, we need to highlight, and we need to provide more support and more financial resources so women can continue to excel to the highest possible standard. This includes putting women of color in leadership positions and providing more resources. Ultimately, to be seen and heard is imperative to the women's student athlete success.
All right, thank you. Thank you all. We do have some questions that have come in from the audience, so let's go ahead and see how many of these we can address in the next few minutes. Lisa, let's start with you.
Great.
How do you make athletic events attractive to non-student athletes?
Wow, that's a great question. The fan engagement is always a thing that you are looking at when you're putting on events. So anything that you can do in venue that you can't necessarily get by watching it on TV are things that you can do to attract other people. So whether that's meeting the student athletes while you're there after the competition, or anything that you can do that gets people that want to come out and not just watch it on television.
That's good, thank you. Chris, next one is for you. Women's flag football as an emerging sport is very exciting. How can we assure female coaches will have the opportunity to coach, since football is a male-dominated sport?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The schools in our conference that have gone out there looking for coaches, it's a challenging proposition, because there's not the normal channels that you're pulling those from. I made a contact in one of my communications with a young lady that's one of the assistant coaches for the Team USA, and she lives in the Charlotte area, and so she's someone that I've communicated with, and of course she has a whole. And she's a coach of the Team USA, so she's got representatives from the USA team, and so I think that where flag football is being played now, I think to try to tap into that, because those young ladies have grown up with it, but it's a challenge, because there's not a long history of women playing flag football, and so your schools are going to have to be creative with trying to find the best coach they can because of that. But I think tapping into where it is playing, and then now 4 years from now, that's going to be a different story, because there's going to be a lot more young ladies that have gone through college and have played. I mean, we sponsor acrobatics and tumbling, and it's amazing how many former acrobatics and tumbling student athletes are getting the opportunity to coach within a couple years, even be head coaches within a couple years. So I think that dynamic will change in 4 or 5 years, but you're just going to have to be really proactive in the short term, I think.
Very good. This question is for anyone on the panel. How can a woman student athlete who is aspiring to become a coach administrator in the field to set themselves apart in the room where it happens? So how can they set themselves apart?
I truly believe being an advocate for asking questions when needed. I used all my resources to truly help me excel, and I would say my best suggestion is to truly ask for help. Don't be afraid to learn more, to pick someone else's brain, because that information can help set you apart for sure.
That's good. Anyone else?
I would say be proactive. I mean, the number of people that reach out and, just trying to open a door, or, we say all the time that who you know matters probably more than what you know, because people want to surround themselves with people that they think are going to be really good at what they're doing. And so you have to let somebody know what you're interested in, and then, maybe it takes you on a crooked path of getting there, but there's the opportunity that could be there after that.
Next question. This one is for you, Chris. As a male with the goal of helping elevate women's sports, what role can I play in achieving this goal?
The question, the person who asked the question is a male, wasn't it? Okay.
Yes.
I think we've used the word, Lisa has as well, being proactive. That's what I would come back to as well. I think looking for opportunities to make sure that you're being very inclusive, looking for opportunities to make sure that that females have the same opportunities that men have in whatever the question, whatever the dynamic, whatever the decision is. I just think being proactive and being intentional is likely the best answer.
Good. This one is for anyone on the panel. What is one word you say to NCAA female athletes of tomorrow to continue this new tradition of change makers who deserve the limelight?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. For anyone on the panel, what is one word you say to the NCAA female athletes of tomorrow to continue this tradition of change makers who deserve the limelight?
Believe. Believe in yourself. Believe that the opportunities are going to come. When you get knocked down, get back up. Believe. Believe and you can do it.
Perseverance.
Persevere.
Confidence.
Confidence.
I have a phrase, don't accept no.
That's good. Next question for Lisa and Chris. Can you share some examples of effective student-athlete recruiting strategies in the early stages of schools starting an emerging sport on their campus?
So I'm gonna have to go back to my campus days to think of that, but specifically with acrobatics and tumbling, again, similar to flag football, there wasn't the pipeline of that happening in growing up. And so, looking at cheerleaders and looking at gymnasts and trying to explain then what the sport is and show how the skill set that they have can translate into them becoming an elite acrobatics and tumbling, student athlete. And so, you have to get creative and look outside that, especially again if there's not that pipeline of the sport and opportunities going before. So you have to just think creatively as to where is someone that you see that looks athletic for that sport, and maybe go into that. I think back remember when women first started to do pole vault in track and field, they went to the gymnast world to try to entice them to come in. So I think you just have to, depending on what it is, think creatively, look for the skill set or the athleticism that you're looking for in that sport, and then think of where you see that in other places.
I think connecting with, it depends how new or how emerging it is. Acro and tumbling is another example. It's an emerging sport, but especially in the Southeast, it's being played lots of places. And so there are established programs to go and emulate, talk to, look at, and determine where they're recruiting from. But I think, as we're launching this women's flag football from the beginning, I can tell you a couple of things we're doing there. We are connecting our coaches with the local NFL teams in our area, because those NFL teams are doing events at their stadium on a regular basis. The Panthers, the Falcons, they're doing these, where it is being played at the high school level. I'm thinking around Atlanta, around Charlotte, around Raleigh. Those areas, there are jamborees and different events where there's just tons of high school competition being played. sometimes that's being run through NFL flags. Sometimes those NFL teams are a part of it. So we're trying to get our coaches connected with those individuals so they can go into those pockets. They can be part of observing during showcases and different things like that are taking place. We've made some connections with some guy in the Charlotte, Mecklenburg County area that is not only part of the National Federation of High School Associations to grow the sport of women's flag football, but he's a coach himself. And so I've gotten all of our coaches connected to him to learn. So those are, when it's on the very ground level, it's got to be pretty grassroots. The more established it is, the more you can emulate what's going on.
That's good. Coach Stevens, this one is for you. How can coaches and administrators make a more inclusive environment for student athletes with disabilities?
I think when you do not know something and when you are unsure, try to find a specific program. And I'm thinking Gallaudet, for example, is for the deaf and hard of hearing. And over the years now, I have established connections with colleagues who are aware of our university and now are aware of people who are wearing hearing aids or cochlear implants. And coaches and even teachers have reached out to me in different settings about what they can do to help their student athlete who may be deaf or hard of hearing. And I definitely do not have all of the answers, and each individual is different, but I think it's very important to don't just Google and try and find that research there. Try and reach out to different organizations and universities who tailor and have specific programs designed and designated for people with disabilities. And I think, excuse me, it's important to also mention that deaf and hard of hearing is labeled as a disability, but there are so many other disabilities out there. And when I say but, I think it's important for the audience to know and understand that the deaf and hard of hearing community do not think of themselves as disabled, and they can do everything else, but they just are not able to hear. So the important matter is don't always put people in a box, and don't always put specific disabilities in a box. I think it's important to understand, your level of not knowing something and being very curious, and extremely important to be curious. But I also think, we've got to make sure that we're not overstepping or trying to do something for a deaf and hard of hearing student athlete or somebody who is maybe neurodivergent. There's so many disabilities, as I mentioned, so don't put people in boxes, I think is just number one. We want to embrace differences because every single one of us are different. And continue to stay curious, but continue to know when you don't know something, and seek for that guidance and just learn. Always be a student of life and student of the game.
Very good. Please, a round of applause for this panel. We want to thank you for attending. Thank you for your attention, your questions. We want to make sure that in this conversation, we also leave you with strategies, ways that you can actually take back to your campus and have considerations of elevating and celebrating women's sports. It's flourishing. And we see that when given the proper stage, not only does it flourish, but it does grow. We want you to make sure that you reach out to folk like those on the stage and to the Office of Inclusion for support and information. There is information in the actual app. We want to make sure that you're letting us know how you felt about the session and any information that we could further provide for you. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tonight. There's also a session here at 3:45, so we're going to try and do a quick changeover. But again, thank you for joining us tonight.